Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
First and foremost, I want to say thank you to your daughter and the courage that she exhibited, and I know what she sacrificed and what you sacrificed. And I'd like for us to show our appreciation for Heather. You can do better than that. I was in the 7th grade in Philadelphia, in North Philly, where I'm from. And class was interrupted. Jerry Williams, in the 6th grade, was murdered at 29th and York. Oh. It was overwhelming, but it was not uncommon. 50 years ago, I had a sawed-off shotgun at my head in North Philly. And the person with the sawed-off shotgun lived across the street from me. It was only because I knew him, knew his mother's name, his sister's name, his family, was I able to convince him to take the gun from my head, and it wasn't me who he was after. Violence is devastating. My uncles were Philadelphia policemen, and they started Concerned Black Men 40 years ago. I want to acknowledge Frank Malone for what the black men are doing here. Frank, stand up. I want to briefly talk about something a little different, and that's this. I know people who have been murdered, and I know people who have murdered. And most people who live in communities like this, in communities like where I was raised, know them, and they are in our families. The murderers often know their victims and their victims' families. And when we talk about this problem, and you're right in terms of relationships, and I want to focus particularly on our community. And I want to talk about the 21st century and where we're going. And really, I don't want to take a lot of time, but I want to talk about the subject from the helicopter to the ground. See, a lot of us talk about the problem as if these guys in Chicago and around the corner and in Detroit and in New York are from another planet. They could be sitting next to you on the bus. That's right. And they could be the nicest people in the world, and they're not foreigners, but we treat them as if they're foreigners. And that's before we even know what they do or where they're from. And the way that we view the problem is oftentimes we over-intellectualize the problem, and we look at it from the helicopter. But oftentimes, you got to go down to the ground. You got to go down to the ground because the guys that I know, I spoke at Lorton some years ago to 700 men. And the conversation that I had with them was about the fact that when someone is hurt in our community, you hurt them, you hurt their family, and then you hurt yourself and you hurt your family. And it's a vicious cycle. And nobody understood that better than them. And there is nobody better to go on the ground to deal with the problem that we are having in our community than the members of our community. When the policemen in Philadelphia, through Concerned Black Men, and the firemen decided that there was a problem with the gangs, they went to the community and they interacted. They sat down with the boys and they talked to them. They spent time with them. So I want to suggest in the limited time that I have, and I certainly don't have the time to talk about historical problems and the socioeconomic problems, but I want to just say practically, there are things that we can do, maybe even a little bit more differently. Maybe we have to stop thinking about it as being like a totally different world, and these guys over here that you can't talk to, that they have no humanity, no sensibility. And maybe we need to change the way that we think a little bit about how we approach this problem. Because some of the smartest guys that I know, and I know a lot of smart people, were the guys that I grew up with in North Philadelphia, many who never went to school, and many of them who served time for a crime, and sometimes a crime of violence. And in that respect, I'm going to share with you something I think is critical, is that we have to be, two quick thoughts, and I'm going to stop because I know I got a window of time. One is we have to be more collaborative. I think it's important that we have people from different backgrounds here, but I don't think we are collaborative enough or do as much as we can because it becomes an intellectual, social, political space. None of us have walked down, or I can't say none of us because I know that's not true, but we haven't walked in those streets with this violence. We don't connect with people. We don't go into those homes. We don't feel their pain. We don't have those conversations. We have to change the way we even think about approaching the problem. When Marion Barry was living, and I'll close with this, we talked about this. And this was that with crack cocaine, we had an epidemic in our families. The families were destroyed, men were taken out of their homes, and it significantly impacted the black community. We wait till somebody gets in trouble, and then we institutionalize them. But what's missing is that we don't take the opportunity to give our young people the values, the mentorship, the guidance, the intellectual stimulation, the exposure that will make a difference in their lives, and then it becomes an afterthought after fact. So what I suggested to Marion Barry, and it's an idea that I'll share, because that was a long time ago, and the idea was that we should take our young brothers and sisters away from their homes and from their communities. Because if I'm from one part of the city and you're from another part of the city or another part of the county, I don't know you, and there's this myth about the distance between us. But if we're waking up together for 8 weeks in the same area, on the same farm, and that we have to assume full and complete personal responsibility for our lives during the course of that 168-hour week for 8 weeks, cooking, cleaning, making up your beds, working with each other, augmented by mentors, counselors, tutors, people teaching you what Concerned Black Men taught the young people of Philadelphia, chess, being introduced to guys who have been in the system, being introduced to guys who want to contribute. In that 8-week cycle, and also informed by sensitivity to counseling, because young people have these needs, after 8 weeks, you will begin an incredible cycle and relationship of men throughout, young boys throughout the region that will then self-perpetuate. My time is over. Harold?